Elijah Brooks, a man sculpted by years of diligent work and a quiet dedication to his country, finally achieved a dream. A two-story haven, nestled in a tranquil Virginia cul-de-sac. At 34, he had climbed the ladder within the Department of Homeland Security, his expertise residing within the Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate. He wasn't the guy in the field kicking down doors. His battlefield was data, his weapons, meticulous analysis, and an uncanny ability to spot inconsistencies in immigration paperwork. It was a job that demanded precision and anonymity, a perfect fit for his unassuming nature. The house, a symbol of his success, was supposed to be an oasis, a retreat from the complexities of his work. Lush green grass, the chirping of birds, the kind of peaceful silence that city life had long eroded. He envisioned lazy weekend mornings, grilling on the patio, and maybe even starting a small vegetable garden. Little did he know, this idyllic vision was about to be shattered. The unwelcome awakening came in the form of Karen Withers, a woman who radiated a potent mixture of suspicion and entitlement. From the moment Elijah's Range Rover graced his new driveway, Karen's eyes became a relentless scanner, dissecting his presence with an unsettling intensity. Her initial reaction was a visible tightening of her grip on her purse, a subtle yet unmistakable signal of her disapproval. Then came the more overt displays, the deliberate activation of her sprinkler system whenever he walked his rescued greyhound, Zeus, past her perfectly manicured lawn. These passive-aggressive actions were annoying, but Elijah initially dismissed them as garden-variety neighborly quirks. He was used to navigating complex situations, identifying hidden agendas, so he told himself that this was just a personality clash. He even tried to extend an olive branch, offering a friendly wave, but it was met with a cold, almost disgusted glare. The air around Karen seemed to crackle with unspoken assumptions, a prejudice that seeped into every interaction. Elijah chose to rise above and focus on setting up his home. He unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and started familiarizing himself with his new sanctuary. But the feeling of being watched, judged, lingered. He couldn't shake the sense that he was an unwelcome intruder in his own home, a feeling fueled by the unwavering scrutiny of Karen Withers. The tension simmered for a week, building with each subtle act of hostility. Then came the boiling point. Elijah, wanting to tidy up his property, was trimming the hedges in his front yard, deeply engrossed in a phone conversation with his aunt. The conversation flowed naturally between English and Creole, the language of his heritage. The rhythm of the familial back and forth filled with love and warmth, reminding him of home. This was when Karen chose to make her move. Storming out of her house wearing a tennis visor and a string of fake pearls, she accosted him in a voice loud enough to carry down the entire block. "Are you working for the owners of this house?" she demanded, her tone accusatory. The question hung in the air, laced with assumptions of his inferiority. It was a clear and calculated attempt to publicly humiliate him, to strip him of his dignity in front of his new neighbors. Elijah, however, refused to take the bait. He straightened up, clipped the hedge trimmers, and looked her directly in the eye. "I am the owner," he replied, his voice calm and steady, but carrying an undeniable undercurrent of steel. The statement seemed to short-circuit Karen's brain. Her face contorted into a mask of disbelief. The implications of his words seemed to scramble her preconceived notions. She blinked several times, her mouth opening and closing without uttering a sound. The triumph she had clearly anticipated never materialized. Instead, she seemed dumbstruck, unable to process the reality that the black man in the Range Rover actually owned the house. Without a word, she turned abruptly and stomped back inside, disappearing behind the perfectly manicured facade of her own home. The encounter left Elijah shaken, but also resolute. He knew this was more than just a simple misunderstanding. It was a clear demonstration of prejudice, a blatant attempt to undermine his rightful place in the community. He knew that this would not be the end of the story, but he was determined to stand his ground and defend his hard-earned peace. 2 days after the unsettling confrontation, a knock echoed through Elijah's house. He wasn't expecting anyone. Certainly not who was stood on his porch. As the door swung open, he faced 2 federal agents, both of whom he recognized from a past fraud training seminar. Their faces were etched with a mixture of embarrassment and professionalism. They explained that they were there to investigate an anonymous tip claiming that Elijah was harboring undocumented immigrants and that his own immigration papers might be falsified. The absurdity of the situation was almost comical. Here he was, someone who dedicated his life to upholding the law, now being accused of breaking it based on nothing but prejudiced assumptions. The irony was bitter. He could almost see Karen, Withers smirking from behind her curtains, satisfied with her attempt to weaponize the very system he worked to protect. Elijah, masking his anger, invited the agents inside. He offered them coffee, attempting to diffuse the tension with a touch of hospitality. Then, he pulled out his federal ID, his security credentials, and a digital copy of the title to his house. The agents' faces softened as they examined the documentation. One of them started laughing, a mixture of incredulity and recognition. "Elijah, man. Someone really messed with the wrong guy," he chuckled, shaking his head. The case was closed within 5 minutes. The agents, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, apologized for the intrusion and quickly departed. But the incident left a mark. Elijah felt a deep frustration and hurt at the blatant racism that had motivated the false report. It was a stark reminder that prejudice could strike anywhere, even in his own backyard. While they were gone, Elijah wasn't done. The closing of the case didn't bring Elijah the peace he craved. Instead, it ignited a fire within him. Karen Withers had attempted to weaponize the government against him, and he refused to let her get away with it. He decided to fight back, but not with anger or aggression. Instead, he would use the same tools he employed in his professional life: meticulous research and a relentless pursuit of the truth. Elijah, fueled by a sense of righteous indignation, began to quietly and methodically investigate Karen's background. He didn't engage in anything illegal. He only accessed public records, the kind anyone could find with a little digging. He knew he had to tread carefully to avoid any accusations of harassment or abuse of power. His aim wasn't revenge, but justice. What he discovered was a web of financial irregularities and ethical breaches. Karen was filing for a homestead tax exemption in both Virginia and Florida, a clear violation of federal tax law. She also claimed to run a nonprofit community grant fund. But the organization hadn't reported a single tax filing in 8 years, raising serious questions about its legitimacy. The final piece of the puzzle was the housekeeper she had hired 2 years ago, paying her in cash without reporting any of it to the IRS. Each detail painted a picture of a woman who was not only prejudiced, but also deeply dishonest, willing to exploit the system for personal gain. The information was infuriating, but Elijah knew he had to remain calm and objective. He meticulously compiled all the evidence, ensuring its accuracy and completeness. The closing of the case didn't bring Elijah the peace he craved. Instead, it ignited a fire within him. Karen Withers had attempted to weaponize the government against him, and he refused to let her get away with it. He decided to fight back, but not with anger or aggression. Instead, he would use the same tools he employed in his professional life: meticulous research and a relentless pursuit of the truth. Elijah, fueled by a sense of righteous indignation, began to quietly and methodically investigate Karen's background. He didn't engage in anything illegal. He only accessed public records, the kind anyone could find with a little digging. He knew he had to tread carefully to avoid any accusations of harassment or abuse of power. His aim wasn't revenge, but justice. What he discovered was a web of financial irregularities and ethical breaches. Karen was filing for a homestead tax exemption in both Virginia and Florida, a clear violation of federal tax law. She also claimed to run a nonprofit community grant fund. But the organization hadn't reported a single tax filing in 8 years, raising serious questions about its legitimacy. The final piece of the puzzle was the housekeeper she had hired 2 years ago, paying her in cash without reporting any of it to the IRS. Each detail painted a picture of a woman who was not only prejudiced, but also deeply dishonest, willing to exploit the system for personal gain. The information was infuriating, but Elijah knew he had to remain calm and objective. He meticulously compiled all the evidence, ensuring its accuracy and completeness. With a collection of information securely in his possession, he faced a critical decision: how to bring Karen's transgressions to light without revealing his own involvement. He knew that going public could escalate the situation, potentially leading to a messy and protracted legal battle. Instead, he chose the path of anonymity, utilizing a secure federal whistleblower portal to submit his findings. The portal was designed for individuals to report suspected fraud, waste, and abuse within the government, guaranteeing confidentiality and protection from retaliation. Elijah carefully crafted his report, presenting the information in a clear, concise, and factual manner. He included all the relevant documentation, ensuring that the evidence spoke for itself. He detailed the tax fraud, the unreported income, and the discrepancies in the nonprofit's financial records. He understood that the information would be thoroughly vetted by the appropriate authorities. He trusted the system and hoped that justice would be served, regardless of the source of the report. Submitting the information was a nerve-wracking experience. He knew that he had potentially set in motion a chain of events that could have serious consequences for Karen Withers. But he also knew that he had done the right thing. He had stood up to prejudice and held her accountable for her actions. Now all he could do was wait and see what the government investigation uncovered, hoping that the truth would prevail. 3 weeks later, the quiet of the cul-de-sac was shattered. The first sign was the arrival of IRS agents, their presence immediately drawing the attention of the entire neighborhood. Then came the DHS compliance investigators, followed by the most dramatic arrival of all, an actual ICE agent. It turned out that Karen had listed her housekeeper's name on a falsified legal document, triggering an immigration-related inquiry. The scene unfolded like a grotesque theater production. Karen, initially defiant, tried to scream and accuse. Everyone on her porch, her voice cracking with a mixture of anger and fear. Neighbors gathered, their phones recording the spectacle. Someone even started a live stream, broadcasting her meltdown to the world. As the pressure mounted, she crumbled, collapsing in her driveway, screaming that the immigrants were taking over, her prejudice laid bare for all to see. Then she saw Elijah. He stood on his front step, sipping his coffee, watching the scene unfold. Their eyes met. The anger that fueled her rant seemed to dissipate, replaced by a chilling realization. She understood that he was responsible, that he had orchestrated her downfall. He didn't say a word. He simply smiled, a subtle gesture of quiet satisfaction. The smile was not born of malice, but of a hard-earned sense of justice. The consequences of her actions now crashed down upon her. Karen was investigated by the IRS, DHS, and the local tax board. Her accounts were frozen pending audit. She had to resign from her local HOA board, and her nonprofit was dismantled for fraud. The peaceful cul-de-sac, once a symbol of her privileged existence, became the stage for her public humiliation. Elijah finally had his peace. He hoped it would inspire others like her to think twice about their actions.